Most publishers think of their email list as a way to drive traffic to their site. Dylan Redekop thinks that's exactly backwards, and he has the data to show while your email is the product. Hey, welcome, Dylan.
Thank
Happy
you.
to have you on the pod.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I'm excited to talk.
Awesome. Yeah, as I've been checking out your world of creators, content creators, and our world of more traditional publishers, I would say, there are a lot of differences, but there's a heck of a lot of overlap. And that's kind of the overlap is really what I want to dig into.
Welcome to the Paywall Podcast, where we discuss paywalls and paywall strategies for news and magazine publishers. This episode of the Paywall Podcast is brought to you by Leaky Paywall. Leaky Paywall is the most flexible WordPress subscription platform. Find out more at leakypaywall.com. And now for today's episode.
Dylan is you're the founder of Growth Currency Media. You started Growth Currency as a pandemic project, I believe, and you made this interesting commitment to publish 100 weekly editions, and somehow it turned into a full-time business. You have two podcast roles. You're the co-host of Growth in Reverse, where you deep dive into how top newsletters grow. You have about 40,000 subscribers. And you were also the former host of Send and Grow, which is Spark Loop's podcast. And
I was.
Yeah, and you're dealing with some bigger publishers like Morning Brew and The Hustle, Work Week, etc. So you're bringing a lot of experience. I think it's almost a decade or more than a decade of newsletter expertise in here, and I'm just psyched for our publishers to hear what you have to say, because I'm sure it'll be a little different than I know it's going to be different from what they've been reading and learning. So, all right, first question: tell me about Growth Currency. Like, you started as a side project, you decided to go for 100 weekly editions. Like, how'd you fall into that?
Yeah. Well, so I got laid off from my job before COVID hit. So it was kind of like I got the pre-COVID layoff at the end of 2019, and then I managed to actually get a job that I maintained through COVID. But during that year, I was like, well, if this happens again, especially with what's happening with COVID, I want to make sure I'm like basically limiting my downside. And so I thought doing that, a good thing to do would be to start a side business or a side project. And everyone was talking about Substack back then in 2020. That was kind of the new hot thing on the market, even though it had been around for a few years. And I was like, well, maybe I should start a Substack newsletter. And I didn't know how to build websites and build newsletter lists, but Substack kind of seemed like a good all-in-one turnkey platform. So in January of 2021, I launched it. I had been kind of, dabbling with the back end of things for a few months, but decided, I should probably just actually hit publish. Nobody's reading this anyway. I have like 0 subscribers. So what harm is there in doing that? And so, I published the first 3 to 5 editions to like me, my test email address, and my wife's email address, and had a really great open rate. And then I started promoting it on Twitter. Twitter was not what it is now. It's got a different name now. And there was a real vibrant community of creators and people building things on Twitter back in, the 2020, 2021 days, at least that I was a part of, that I really enjoyed. And so I was promoting what I was building there. And the newsletter had no real, I wouldn't say it had a real solid premise. I was just like, I need to start this thing, and I'm going to write about what I'm interested in. And then people can follow along if they're interested in those things. To not drone on too long about this, I eventually found my niche as I published more and more. I was like, I'm more interested in writing about this topic and that topic. And so that eventually turned into, I was writing about how I was growing my newsletter. So it turned into one of those kind of annoying meta topics or meta projects that's like a newsletter about growing a newsletter. But I don't regret it at all, because it's got me to the point where now 5 years later, I work as a full-time basically contractor or employee or whatever you want to call it in this industry. And I love it. And every day is different and enjoyable and challenging and all that stuff. So that's kind of a real short fast forward to where we are now, but that's kind of how I got started.
Any takeaways for the 100, issue
Yeah.
challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. I probably had I not like committed to that, and I was inspired by somebody else's story that I had heard who said basically like write a weekly newsletter for 1 year for 52 weeks straight and watch how it changes your life. And I was like,
Mm,
wow, that's like really motivating, inspiring, and I want to see what happens if I do it. And I thought the only downside will be that I have maybe spent more time on something that wasn't fruitful, but really there were no downsides in trying this experiment because I'd be at the very worst, I'd learn something and maybe I'd
right.
learn that I didn't enjoy doing it. So I knew there's way more upsides and it would present way more opportunity. And so sticking with it for 100 straight weeks, I think I took one in the middle there. I took like 1 week off during my birthday. I was like, I just don't want to celebrate my birthday and not have to worry about sending out a newsletter, on that day. So other than that, it was a really good forcing function to me to be committed to something because I'm sure there's people in your audience who are like, yeah, I'm going to stick with this thing, like New Year's resolutions. It's kind of the same idea, right? Like we're going to commit to this thing that is going to change our lives on January 1st. And then,
Mm,
January 22nd rolls around and it's like, you've already forgotten that you had dedicated your life to this new change. And so I thought,
mm,
um, I mean, I could have done that with this newsletter, but I really wanted to stick it out. And I was really motivated by not loving working in the corporate marketing world.
mm.
I had bounced around from job to job a little bit, and so I was like, I want to see this through and see where it takes me because I see there to be a potential in the future doing this kind of work.
Yeah, sounds like you've met the future partially
Yeah.
at least.
Yep. Absolutely.
Um, yeah, so let's switch to Spark Loop when you worked there, and you were
hmm
working with some big publishers, Morning Brew, Hustle. I think a lot of people know those names. Was there anything surprising that you learned from being kind of inside that world of large newsletters that
Yeah.
you could put your finger on?
I think the budgets that were put toward paid growth were pretty mind-boggling.
Mm,
Like we I won't disclose exactly what was spent, and to be completely honest, I didn't have I wasn't the account managers for those companies. I was running more the content end for Sparkloop.
yeah,
But I spoke with their account managers and stuff like that, so I have an idea of what they were spending. And for those who don't know Sparkloop, at that time and still is, was a platform that was connecting basically newsletters together. So you could pay other newsletters to promote your newsletter and you would just pay for, verified leads or verified subscribers. And so it was kind of like when you pay for a Facebook lead, whether that person actually signs up or stays subscribed, you kind of got to pay for
mm,
them no matter what. Whereas Sparkloop, you had a window of up to 28 days where if that person unsubscribes, you don't actually have to pay for them. So there was some really good ways um, that cap downsides for Sparkloop for people who are using Sparkloop that they could grow. Of course, you're going to be paying a little bit more per subscriber, but you're going to get probably a better subscriber, more engaged subscriber, somebody that actually wants to open and read your emails. So, all that being said, these businesses, these newsletters, these publishers were spending a good amount of money um, as Sparkloop as part of their paid growth mix. They weren't all necessarily doing all Sparkloop. They were doing still meta ads and potentially LinkedIn ads, depending on the demographic and that sort of thing. But they were spending a lot of money. And they also quite often they would pay out well per verified subscriber, but they did have pretty strict policies on
mm.
what counted as a verified subscriber. They had to open X amount of emails in X amount of time before they would actually pay out um, for those referred subscribers.
Interesting. So just
Yeah,
let's unpack that a little bit
sure.
because I don't think our audience is probably most are not familiar with the idea. And this is like newsletter cross promotions tactic essentially, or
It
is it
can be.
strictly a paid tactic for similar newsletters?
So you could 100% organize a cross promotion where you would do it for free with another newsletter. You mention my newsletter and yours, and I'll mention yours and mine.
Mm-hmm.
However, we like the platform allowed for that. But really, what this was a version of co-reg, as much as they may not necessarily want to call it a co-registration thing, where it's like, hey, I just signed up for this newsletter, but here are 3 or 4 or 5 other newsletters you might be interested in as well. So this pop-up comes up after you hit subscribe on a
Mm,
newsletter's sign-up page. Widget pops up saying, thanks for subscribing. You might also be interested in XYZ newsletters. subscribe to all, or you can check a box to just subscribe to a couple or one or two of them, or you can just ignore it and say maybe later. And
So,
so what
okay.
Sparkloop did was it provided the software, a plugin that you could add to your landing page that would have that box pop up. And then on the back end, we had a whole partner directory of newsletters you could choose to recommend in that spot. And those
Mm,
people like Morning Brew, like Hustle, were paying you per subscriber that you sent their way through those recommendations. That was the primary way people were both spending
mm.
money and making money on the platform.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Interesting. Okay. So paid newsletter growth. Let's dig in a little bit into that cross promotion side, because I
Sure.
think I went through that with you. So I signed up for your newsletter, Growth Currency, and then I got some recommended newsletters, which I checked off a few of those and signed up.
Yep.
In the sort of traditional publisher space, whether like your local news publisher or magazine publisher, especially in local news, that is something I actually have never seen. And
Hmm.
maybe there's some, my question to you really is can a traditional publisher apply this same idea? And I think it's great if you could find, I mean, ideally you find two publishers that are not competitors,
Hmm.
and it's like you pop up, hey, join the list, and then you join, and then, well, you might be also interested in this other list, but at the same time, a lot of publishers might be competitors,
Yeah.
in a space. So, let me just give you like one example.
Sure.
So in the magazine, kind of the niche world, there's probably more overlap for this kind of thing. And but I can think of two fishing publishers that we work with. They both occupy this, they're competitors, right?
Okay.
And it's like, maybe, like, I don't know if this would be a good idea for them. Okay, you get our newsletter, you might as well get them. And if you
Hmm.
get over there and you let's say you get, fishing publication B recommending fishing publishing publisher A, would that be a good idea? Or are you looking for publications that are a little further apart? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I have some ideas come up. So, one, if you're a local media publisher, so you're publishing a local newsletter based on your town or your city or what that might be, I wouldn't recommend another publisher doing the same thing at all. You could, but what I would do is I'd focus on local businesses that are trying to also grow their email lists, because that way you're like, hey, we've got a local newsletter, we're hyper local, we're also going to promote. This bakery down the street that's trying to grow their email list and their clientele. We're going to promote,
Mm,
the local sports team or the leisure center or the YMCA, and that way it's like it's all seen as a rising tide lifting all boats, as opposed to like, I'm going to recommend this other
right.
local
Right.
newsletter. So that's one strategy you can go, and you could also even say, hey, we're going to be driving paid traffic, because for local newsletters, a really powerful way to grow is paid traffic, because you can geographically target people in your
Right.
city and grow
Mm,
them that way. And so if you're doing that, you can start charging these businesses a small fee or what have you, similar to what Sparkloop is doing, but just arrange it on your own, as long as you can track the metrics and say, for every subscriber we send you, you know, you have to pay us X amount of dollars. Or you could even say, we know we're going to drive 200 leads a day to this page. How about you pay us X amount of money to have you always be, one of the top recommended um,
mm,
email lists or newsletters or whatever to join, or websites to check out, whatever, they or offer a coupon that they're promoting, whatever that might be. There's a lot of
right.
ways you can skin this cat. So I think that would
Right.
be for local media publishers the best way to do that. If you're, excuse me, if you're a fishing magazine, for example, then what I wouldn't recommend necessarily another fishing magazine, but maybe a hunting magazine, maybe a camping magazine, maybe any kind of sort of
Right. Right.
adjacent
Right.
industry that people, rock climbing, or a 4x4, outdoor trail running, these other things that are all very much bow hunting, all that stuff. I'm sure you could
Right.
find people that would be interested. And yet, not everybody's going to be interested in everything. But if you had two or three that had some overlap, I think that would be the better way to go.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think like fishing is, especially in New England, is summer,
Hmm.
which is where these particular publishers are. This is summer activity, and then you get into like fall hunting season. So, going after a hunting publication would probably be a natural
Yeah.
crossover. As far as local news, the thing that jumped into my head is events.
Yep.
So, like, let's
Absolutely.
say, yeah, local news publishers like, hey, you join our list. You might also be interested in this events producer, right?
Hmm.
Or a really large event, the local opera house or
Yeah.
whatever it is. It's like,
Theater,
don't miss
whatever.
an
Yeah.
event. And so, and then they could do the same thing. They can kind of cross promote
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, and so you could
That's
arrange that
very,
as just a you scratch my back, I scratch yours, or it could be
yeah.
like actual agreed partnership on, dollars if one doesn't want to necessarily promote or one is driving far more
Mm,
traffic than the other, because that's often the imbalance when it comes to these cross promotions. Is in theory they're great. You promote yours, I
right,
promote yours, you promote mine, but hey, I've got 50,000 people on my list and you've got like 2,000. So like
right.
there's a bit of a imbalance there. So there are ways to navigate that, but that's often an issue because rarely do people have kind of the exact same subscriber count and open rate and all that.
Paying for it would be the way to balance that out, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Or doing
if
for a
the
longer
50,
period of time. Sorry to interrupt.
right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's some advanced stuff there. Love to hear from anybody listening to this if you're considering doing it or actually doing it. Um, okay. That sounds like kind of like your wheelhouse and what you help content producers with, because that's a deep rabbit hole, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, all right, let's jump to the next. The next question here. I absolutely cannot wait to ask you. We're talking about metrics here, newsletter metrics, right?
Hmm.
And most of our publishers, you're big on measuring replies to a newsletter, where most of our publishers or traditional publishers are looking at open rates. I cannot tell you how many publishers I've talked to, and we're always talking open rates, open. Not even really link clicks. It's like open. And I know that open rates are very variable. The metrics are a little wonky
Hmm.
on that, and I don't know enough to dive into that part of it. But what you're suggesting is that replies are the single most important metric when it comes to like newsletter success. Um, some publishers they'll do no replies,
Yeah.
like it's crazy.
Hmm.
And um, so why is this? Why do you feel that way?
So I think the no replies thing is the phenomenon that you just simply aren't putting it in people's minds that they can reply.
Mm,
A lot of people don't even think to reply to a major media outlet. Or like if I got Morning Brew's email, I probably would not think to hit reply on it. Just as
mm,
an example of somebody who's publishing daily to a big list. That being said, if there was a call to action in the email saying, "Hey, hit reply. We'd love to know what you think." Our team responds to every reply we get, or something along those lines. Say whatever you're comfortable saying. Don't make promises you can't fulfill. But I think the biggest, lowest hanging fruit is just asking for a reply. And the reason why I think replies are important is in this day and age of like we talked about open rates being inflated by Apple Mail
mm,
privacy policies, all that stuff, and more and more other email clients, kind of opening and scanning emails for you and clicking links. They're bots, making sure things are safe. Uh, Replies are really hard to they're really hard to fake, if you will. I mean, you can get an out of office reply, of course, but really a
mm.
reply just is, to me, the strongest indication of an engaged reader, even if it's a reply saying, "Hey, I did not like this edition," or "This was not a good take." Like all of that feedback,
Right,
a negative reply
right.
is still a reply. And yeah, people have haters, quote unquote, people who will just, get upset at something you said or wrote. Um, but I also would say that's a sign that you're at least sparking some emotion. You're getting
Mm,
people to think. Your message is resonating in one or another. Typically, if you anger somebody, you're probably somebody probably is also very much agreeing with your point of view too. So I just think replies are so powerful, and I still wish I got more replies than I do. And um,
hmm,
it's something that I think we need to be more cognizant on trying to get. And the only challenge with replies is always asking for a reply can wear out your reader. So you don't
right.
necessarily need to get a reply every time. You can publish content that invokes a reply, like I was just saying. If you can spark emotion in people or
Mm,
share a heartwarming story or maybe a story that you feel needs to have more support behind it, or people should know about, get more awareness around. Those kinds of stories as well tend to bring up emotion and spark more replies without you having to say, "Hey, hit reply. I'd love to hear your thoughts." But even
Hmm.
still, I think adding some kind of call to action saying, "What do you think about this issue or this challenge or this great news? We'd love to hear from you."
It's great. You just got me going. I was thinking about like what would be the use cases for it. And of course, the first thing that popped in my head was like a survey. I mean, anytime,
Hmm.
if you're looking for feedback from your readership, I mean, just use your newsletter to tell people like, ask one question, have them reply to that one question, right? Keep it simple, right? The
Yep.
second thing is though is like I just think of a more traditional niche like magazine or we call them niche publishers now is, there always were letters to the editor, right? Like that
Yeah.
was always a big deal in the past, where and they were super interesting to read, right? And the thing that I see now is I see a lot of publishers struggling with comments on their websites. Some have them, some don't. They require effort to moderate. If they go really negative, that actually impacts the quality of the
Yeah.
article. It's not great. But if you're replying back to an email, um, you can probably collect those comments, and with AI, especially today, it'd be easy to kind of assemble them into another piece of valuable
Yep.
content for the readership, right? And
Yep.
sort of more of a curated comments, but it's done via the newsletter. So that
Yeah.
just like I was just like, oh, boom, wow,
Yeah.
okay. Um,
One of my favorite newsletters, it's a triathlon newsletter, and I know the publisher pretty well. He's a one-man show, and he often, not every single edition, but most editions, he'll have a little survey, especially when it's like news about Ironman or the triathlon world. If something kind of questionable or polarizing comes into play, and he puts a survey and he gets people basically like, "What's your take on this?" And I agree, I disagree. Like, his answers are better than that, but just for sake of example, he says, "I agree, I disagree, or I have thoughts, dot, dot, dot." And he just prompts people to
mm,
give their say. And then in his next edition, he'll share those comments. Of course, he'll not call it the reader's name, but he'll share the comments from what people are writing back to him. And so as you do that, people will see, oh, my comment
mm,
is going to get some airplay here. And so that
right,
just inspires more people to reply. So when you can
right.
show and you can prove that, you don't just say I replied to all emails, you're actually going to like show some of the responses in your newsletter if it fits, right? If the format fits, then that's just another way to see people, or to basically people have faith in you saying I will reply, and I'll also showcase maybe your response in my email, and that could be kind of like the letter to the editor that you were just talking about, where people are writing in their feedback, and you can share those either anonymously, or if they're willing to have their name, they can maybe check off yes, same, you can give my first name or what have you.
Yeah, I love it. That is great. I would
Hmm.
absolutely do that in favor of having public comments on the site. I mean,
Yeah.
in our space, we have publishers that will only let like paid subscribers post comments,
Hmm.
or maybe just free registered readers post comments, and that does work. It has sort of gates the comments and makes people behave better. But
Yeah.
but making it easy where it's like you're sending a piece of content out, you have an opinion in it, you have content in it, whatever it is, and it's like, and somebody's reading it. I mean, just to hit reply and write something back, like there's no less friction than
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
And then reassembling that to use that as content for, the next article or whatever you decide to publish. It's great.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Nice. Okay, let's keep trucking here.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about lead magnets, because I just lead magnets.
Okay.
And what I'm kind of exploring is lead magnets for local news. May or may not be a thing, but I want to share something that happened with one of our niche publishers. Um, with sort of traditional publishing, the content is the sort of the value all the time, and there's no real need for lead magnets, as I thought, but was wrong. And I had a conversation with the Moss Report last week, and it's a niche publication, and what they did for their registration wall was put together a package of like 20 articles. Now they're sort of in the cancer information space, and they have this if you register with an email and a password, you get this like 20 article package of, how this can help you going through your experience with, fighting cancer.
Okay.
And instead of like just relying on an article that, where the article pops and it's like, hey, register, you get this article, you get a few more articles, which does work like crazy, by the way. He
Mhm.
told me and floored me. He said, when I put this package together and I promoted it as, this like heavy, big thing that you get if you just register for free, which is kind of the definition of a lead magnet, his registration rate went up, he said 20 to 30% over a
Wow.
standard free registration, which blew me out the window. I was like, wow, that is unbelievable. So I was thinking, okay, well, if you're covering a niche topic, that makes total sense. Put together a nice lead magnet, a nice package of content that you have to register for. It's free, but
Mhm.
email address. Then I was thinking, okay, how does this apply to local news, right? Local news does and maybe it doesn't, but local news does a good job of like, you're producing daily content, right? It's
Yep.
important, especially if it's local and you're local. It's like, this is really important stuff. Do you even need to give away more important, like a bigger bucket of important content, when
Mhm.
you already have a big bucket of important content? I don't know. I just want to know if you had any thoughts on sort of the local news angle.
Yeah, I struggle with lead magnets for daily current event news focused publishers
Mm,
because really, like you said, kind of the content is the lead magnet. It's like, yeah, I want to know about what's going on in my city, so I'm going to subscribe just on that merit alone. That being
yeah.
said, to maybe make it that much more uh, beneficial to the new subscriber, for lack of a better term, you could offer up like, here is a list of all the upcoming events in your area, or
Mm,
things that you can do with kids or for families, or um, you could even you could get some coupons or discounts, or like the old coupon books that people used to give out. You could have like a digital version
oh
of that,
yeah.
for example, from a local
Yeah.
business, so that people are more inclined to subscribe and sign up. And I'm
Yeah.
sure local businesses would be happy to offer a 15-20% off a oil change, or grocery store, bakery, or coffee shop, or you name it, right? I'm sure that
Mm,
wouldn't be too hard to get those from. So they might want a limit as to how many they can give away, which can make things a little bit trickier digitally. But that being said, I think there is a way to do that, and a way you could get people to opt in a little bit faster for your daily newsletter, as a local business. If you want to test the waters, you could offer something like that. But yeah, I think it's a struggle because with lead magnets, with local news, like you said, like people are signing up because they want to be informed about what's going on in their space. And so kind of tricking them into getting on the list, I don't think is going to work.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
at least it would be harder. You could just maybe make a fence sitter who's like, I get the local newspaper. I used to, but I don't know about this. And then if you get them on the list with something like I just mentioned, some kind of lead magnet, then they see the value of it. It's like, oh dang, this is like really informative. I'm glad that I actually, took the bait and signed up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree with you. I think local news already has enough of sort of a powerful arsenal of content to get people on board. And I
Yeah.
think what you're describing too is a little more like how to convert from free to paid. Whereas
Yeah.
if you're gonna offer like extra content, like if you go to paid, you'll get, it's all about building value. It could be ad free, it could be obviously you get access to all the content. Maybe you get an extra newsletter in the afternoon, which is
Hmm.
like, more current than the next morning's
Yeah.
edition. Things like that. Um, so okay. So that sort of is a good segue into uh onboarding and sequencing, which I know
Okay.
you're a big fan of.
Yeah.
So I was reading that you had actually rebuilt your welcome sequence. You were looking at subscribers from paid recommendations were kind of different than organic subscribers,
Hmm.
and I've sort of been scratching my head like okay, I kind of see that, but I kind of don't. Like, can you walk us through that?
Yes, and it's somewhat hypothetical, but also there is some proof in the data. But the hypothetical nature of it is when I use LinkedIn primarily as a way or place to get organic subscribers. So I'm using,
Okay.
the social media algorithms. It used to be Twitter. I've dabbled with Instagram and, Threads, and more lately on Substack Notes, which is kind of Substack's version of Twitter. And so when somebody sees my content on one of those platforms and is like, hey, this is, informing or informative, educational, or entertaining, which I think your newsletter has to be at least one of those three things for people to,
Right.
be compelled
Right.
to subscribe. Um, then they sign up they go to my landing page from my link in my bio, and they subscribe. I think there's so much more intent behind that subscriber than somebody who is signing up to a different newsletter altogether, and then my newsletter pops up in this widget and says, "Hey, you might also like Growth Currency by Dylan Redkop," and they're just sure, and they just click OK and subscribe
Mm,
to all of the
right.
newsletters in that widget, including mine. And then what happens there is they get sent a bunch of welcome emails, including mine and the other ones they just signed up for. And my my gut reaction to that is they didn't intend to sign up for my content, quite likely. Maybe there's an off chance they had seen my stuff before and like, oh yeah, I know this guy. I meant to sign up for his newsletter. I'm going to sign up. But most of the time, these are going to be pretty cold or passive subscribers,
Yeah.
I like to call them, who didn't really sign up for your newsletter. And myself and Chanel, my co-host on our podcast, we call these people basically like followers. They're not really subscribers. They're almost more like a social media follower. And so we try
Mm,
to treat them that way with our sign up flow. And the first email they get from us is basically like assuming they had no intention of signing up for our newsletter. That is honestly how I treat
ah,
them. I
interesting.
I introduce myself and say, "Hey, great to have you here. You might be wondering essentially why you are on why you're
Like,
getting this
why the
email."
heck am I getting this email?
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I because this happened to me, Peter, like, I was getting these emails from people and being like, "I do not remember signing up for this." But sure enough,
Mm,
I had likely, subscribed in one of these recommendation boxes or something along those lines. And so I really was frustrated by the lack of context as to why I was getting that email. And guess what I did? I either, immediately unsubscribed, which is actually doing the sender a benefit because then I'm not on their list anymore. I'm not going to waste their open rate and all that. Or I'd mark it as spam, which is far worse. So
right. Right.
you do not want that. So that's why my spam complaints are super low. I almost never get any spam complaints on my newsletter list. Then it's only about 4,500 people, so it's not exactly massive. But I'm proud of that because I do this onboarding properly, where I'm telling
Mm,
people how they likely subscribe to my newsletter. I even have a little call out, which you can do with Liquid Code inside of Kit and Beehive, these other newsletter platforms, where you can say insert refers newsletter name. And
mm,
so I can even like dynamically insert where they were coming from. So they'd be like, oh, yeah, I did subscribe via so and so's newsletter. And then I have a big opt out button. Like, I, I don't want you to be here if you don't want to be here. So here's your
mm,
chance to like unsubscribe, no harm, no foul.
mm,
We can go on our
mm.
merry way. But if you do want to stick around, then happy to have you. Here's what my newsletter's about. So that's kind of how I approach it. You could do those in different orders if you wanted to, but I think giving people um, basically treating them like they didn't expect to get your email, I think is a really good thing to do from that place of context.
Yeah.
So doing that and then giving them a very clear way to opt out, in my opinion, is also a smart thing to do.
Yeah. You're meeting them where they are. They're in the you kind of sound familiar, but I don't know how I got here.
Yeah.
And you're reminding them, you're being honest about how they got there. And this would be kind of the scenario if you like a local news and you partnered with the local opera house or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I just got on this list. How did I get here? And so
Mhm.
tell me what like did you notice a change in engagement with this approach?
Yeah, because I filter out all of the people who don't want to be there right away. So my
Mm,
open rates, though my newsletter is growing, remain pretty consistent. So quite often people find as their newsletter grows, open rates kind of trickle down and down and down a bit. And so um, I've got quite a few subscribers via these recommendations. And now I should disclose, you mentioned paid recommendations. These are actually free ones. I'm just partnering
right.
with a few people
Right.
through the Kit platform, and they're just doing free recommendations. And we've got an agreement. I'll put you in mine and you put me in yours.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I've gotten, geez, probably over 2,300 subscribers this way. That includes people who have unsubscribed, but just through that alone has driven about 2,300 free paid
Mm,
subscribers. And then I have done a good job at kind of weeding out the people who don't want to be there with the way I've set this up. And so whenever I send out a weekly edition, quite often my unsubscribe rate is, you're going to get unsubscribers kind of no matter what, but
Yeah.
it stays below the 0.5 percent threshold, which is kind of the higher end. So I'm usually well below that, if not half that, and the open rates aren't being affected as the newsletter grows. So
That's amazing.
those are kind of the main things that I've seen from doing this.
Yeah. And that would also, like, to tie it back to the traditional publisher, they're dealing with the casual opt-ins. They're dealing with free registrations, which are a little higher level of engagement because you have to cough up a password
Yep.
when you opt in, and then they're dealing with paid subscribers, right?
Right.
So your campaigns are different. So um, that takes me to the next question.
Yeah.
It's really cool, by the way. I never thought about that. The whole cross promotion thing is awesome. I think if you're listening to this, I would, whether you're local news or whether you're in the niche space, this would be something to really look at to grow the newsletter, because growing the newsletter means growing paid subscriptions. Bottom line, it's just the way it works.
Mhm.
You got more engagement, more surface area to deal with. Okay, so I have a note here. I don't know where this came from, but the note says that you recently covered, this must have been a recent topic of yours, how to convert free Substack subscribers into paid subscribers using a drip sequence. Does that ring a bell with
Mm.
you? Maybe I misread this, but it was something
Yeah.
about converting free to paid but using drip, like a sequence of emails. Is that ringing a bell or no?
It's not specifically, and I wouldn't be the best to speak on that since I don't run a paid newsletter. However, I get drip sequence would basically be like you're you've got to let people know that you've got this free newsletter they sign up for, and then they get dripped out the sequence like, hey, I've also got this paid version. Maybe you want to do a free trial of
Mm,
it. Here's what you
mm,
get. Like, and you would drip this information out over the sequence of, days or weeks. And eventually there would be a main call to action being like, hey, here's your offer to check it out. Um, Maybe you want to give them like 10% off or a free month if you sign up for a year, or,
right,
obviously people will say, your publishers know how the page structure works, so I won't tell them what to do
right,
there, but
right,
you can make
right,
that offer, whatever your offer might be then, as the sort of urgency, scarcity sort of thing where it's like, you sign up now or this offer's off the table. But that's more what I would suspect that means in terms of drip sequence is you don't want to just as soon as they subscribe, I've got this free or I've got this paid newsletter, sign up.
right,
Because
right.
I don't think that would convert as well as warming people up, nurturing them. Nurture drip sequences. These are kind of terms that people are often using in email marketing. So that's probably what I meant if I was writing about that. But
Yeah.
I'm not an expert when it comes to that specific thing.
I'll tell you. Let's talk about drip a little bit because it's an
Sure.
important one. I'll tell you that most publishers that we work, and I've worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of publishers, they're sending out like, okay, somebody registers, they get like a welcome email.
Hmm.
If they get like another email, that would be like less than 50% of the folks we work with, right? So dripping out a series of emails is something that some publishers do, but most do not.
Right.
They're just not. Newsletter strategy is not their wheelhouse typically, unless they're bigger and have a team. Content strategy is their wheelhouse, right? Audience strategy is their wheelhouse.
Hmm.
So, like, the whole drip nurturing thing, I think for a lot of our listeners is new. It's
Yeah.
maybe it's something they've heard of, but they've never really like implemented. Um, so if there were like a top 3 hits of what to do with drip newsletters, is there anything or big hit that you would want to share? And is there like a limit to how many emails you should follow up with? Let's say in this case, it's a free registration, which signals higher level of engagement.
Hmm.
And could be local news, could be niche news. Like
Hmm.
how would you approach, like what kind of value would you send that
Yeah.
particular reader?
I think there's a few things that come to mind, and I've never done this for somebody, but I think a lot of these things cross over. So, you want things to be compelling and you want them to be clear, and you want to have some credibility. So when you want to convert people, those are things that you really need to be. So you want to be clear about what your offer is. Um, whether or not you do that again right away, you can start mentioning this in a drip sequence. Um, but you want to be clear what the offer is. You want to be compelling as why they should subscribe, and you want to be credible. So, what do compelling and credible have to do with this? So, what I would do is I would be getting testimonials or some social proof of people who are paid subscribers
Mm.
who have written nice things about you, who have maybe shared your content publicly, who've written nice things about you on your website in the comment section, whatever that is. If they have not given you permission to share it, blur out their name, or whatever you feel comfortable doing.
Right.
Ideally, you ask for permission to share this content, this feedback, but that would help with credibility. Like, hey, I've gotten so much value out of this thing. I love every edition, or I open every edition. This is the one. This is the one email I never miss, or this is the one. Uh, I don't know what other things they'd be sending people, but this is the one. I never miss an article from this publisher. So
Yeah.
that helps a lot with credibility. Whenever somebody's doing any kind of like product launch on in digital marketing, whether it's a course or a book, an ebook, or a some other valuable resource, even a tool, a SaaS tool, if you will. The biggest push to that is getting people to beta test it so they can give testimonials, so that when you do your big
Mm.
launch, you just got a wall of like people raving about you, raving about your product, raving about your content.
Mm.
So
Mm.
um,
Mm.
that would be the real compelling aspect, and a credibility and compelling nature to what you want to do if you're sending out these emails to get people to subscribe. Is if you don't have that kind of social proof, I would really try to get it. Um, and another way you could do that is by talking about how many quantities. So whether it's how much hours, if you're like, say you're publishing um, something that's more deep dive focused or really deep
Mm.
editorial content.
Mm.
Our
Yeah.
researchers spend hundreds of hours every week
Mm.
getting this
I
sort
like
of
it.
information for you, so that they can see the value in what they're subscribing for, and the value that they're exchanging. If it's $10 a month, they know that it's going to cost them way more of their time and effort,
Right.
and even maybe their own dollars to get this information for themselves. So yeah, it's worth that trade-off of $10 a month for these researchers spending all this time gathering this information for them. So you can
Yeah.
do credibility in different ways, and that's another way you could do it. Or we've published 1,000 editions of our of this content, or of this article, of this newsletter, whatever that might be, or these videos if you're a YouTuber. All these different ways you can use the amount you've published, or the hours you've spent publishing, or maybe the hours of work you've done with people if you're more of a freelancer or somebody producing content and you're building a newsletter that way. There's just a lot of different ways you can use credibility, but that would be one of the key things that I would go for when you're trying to show people the value. I almost use the word
Mm.
convince, but really you don't want to convince them. You just want to show, here's the proof of people
Yeah.
enjoying and loving our product.
Yeah. No, I think that's right on. I mean, for a local news tie-in, I will say that publishers that are focused on government and businesses, and kind of covering the shenanigans that are happening,
Yeah.
and really, and
Yeah.
finding because there's corruption everywhere,
Yeah.
right? They they're pouring time into going after the facts in these cases. And I
Yeah.
can think of a publisher specifically that will sometimes reach out to they'll send a newsletter out and they'll say, hey, we're covering this specific story. Here's what's happened so far. This is why we think it's important. We need $1,500 to pay the journalist to really find the answer. And I can't remember where this data comes from, but if there's, we talk about like news deserts, and I'm going a little tangent here, but
Yeah.
it's cheaper to live in a town that has local news than doesn't, right?
Hmm.
So like the fact that like local news is a counter to corruption in politics and business. It's exactly what it is, and our founding fathers said, "Hey, we need news, right? Like this is the balance between government and
It's
citizenship.
accountability, right?
You need accountability."
Yeah.
And so they looked at the numbers and how expensive things get, how quickly, because of all the like waste and corruption that happen if it's not covered and then acted on. Anyway. Get off
Mhm.
my high horse a little bit here.
That's
So
interesting.
anyway, thanks
I
for
never
that.
thought of that before. That's a really interesting
Yep.
insight for that.
Yep. Yeah, we have there's a town south of us called Claremont. They're in the news. Their local newspaper folded a few years ago, and guess what happened? This past years, they figured out that the high school is $5 million in debt, and it was all misappropriated funds,
Ooh,
and the school was on the verge of shutdown, and still is on the verge of shutdown. Right? It's
unreal.
like
Nobody was
50.
holding their
Nobody's
feet to the
covering.
fire. Yeah.
Nobody's looking at it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. Anyway, okay,
Mm.
couple more things. We'll wrap it up. AI. Got to talk about AI a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Is it impacting the newsletter space? You think? Not really. I mean, there's two ways to look at it. We use AI to do everything we do today in business, and then there's the other. We use AI to actually produce the content,
Yeah.
like without human interference. So, what are your thoughts on AI in the newsletter space?
Yeah. It is. Yeah. It's everywhere, right? So I'm glad you brought it up. I think my stance is AI is not bad, and it can be very helpful. It can be a good tool. I like using AI more as a um, ideation, a sparring partner, somebody to poke holes through things, to maybe even do some editing to what I've written to tighten things up. Sometimes I can be overly verbose, as maybe you've heard over this last hour. So I like using AI in that way. Um, I personally do not believe you should be using AI to create content. So
Yeah.
some people say, well, I've written maybe hundreds of thousands of words on the internet, whether it's social posts, newsletter editions, articles, whatever have blog posts, whatever, what have you. And so I can feed that all into an AI system that can use my voice and everything like that. And I say, yes, that is true. But AI is not going to say, oh, this is like that time when I was 20 years old and I had this experience and it relates to this. Like you can't bring in your own unique perspectives and experiences
Mm,
and opinions and beliefs. AI cannot do that for you. At least I don't think it can. And I don't think you should really rely on it because when we start doing that, we are we're like delegating all of our thinking to AI, and then what we're not really doing much thinking, we're not doing much creating, we're not being creative,
right.
and I think we're doing ourselves a disservice, and we're kind of doing our readers probably a disservice by doing that. And I think AI will probably get to the point where nobody's going to really be able to tell who's writing this
Mm,
because right now it's all a big joke. You can tell AI content if somebody just creates a simple prompt, gets
yeah.
AI to write them a social media post or what have you, or even a
Yeah.
newsletter, and then
Yeah.
publishes it. It's like, yeah, you can tell. You
Yeah.
can tell the AI isms. But I think it'll get to a point where that's going to be a lot harder. But I do think that um, you should not, at least I don't think you should use AI to publish 100% content. You can use it to help you. I don't think it should be leaned on as a content
Yeah.
creation tool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like somebody made a comment the other day. I was listening to another podcast. It was like, AI is not like doing the job, but it's like you grew 8 arms.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And now you're just doing things faster. That's all.
hmm I mean, I
All
love
right.
it for like creating podcast show notes. It's really helpful that way. I mean, I still have to review them
Yeah.
and make sure I'm like, I don't think we actually talked about this,
Right.
and
Right.
say like, don't hallucinate and all this stuff. But it's really made summaries so much more useful. Like when we have our own private community, Chanel and I do, and so when we have guests to come in and do speaking sessions, it's great to throw that transcript. Those are hour plus speaking sessions, and we call
Mm,
them creator sessions. It's great to throw that transcript into AI, into Claude or ChatGPT, and say, create some headlines and summaries of what we talked about here
yeah,
and some
for
takeaways.
sure.
And it's great for that. And it's great for other things as well. I just don't believe, or I don't want to ever use it as something that is going to be um, my
Yeah.
content, right? And I think people want more personality and they want you, like you're talking to them in your newsletter, at least when you're writing maybe more of a personally branded newsletter as opposed to a company facing newsletter. Even still, I think a company facing newsletter would do well having somebody as the face of it, but that's a whole maybe other topic for another day. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the data is saying that it's easy. Like people are getting AI responses that are so well written that they're kind of like just glancing at it and saying, "Oh, wow, that looks really good." And then they're
hmm
passing that off as the work. But if you actually read this stuff, This happens to me every day. Like I get the response, I'm like, oh, it looks really good. But let's really pay attention, right? Like, and you go through the critical angle and you're like, that's not quite right. And because you're right, it hallucinates. Maybe it's not like a big hallucination, but it's like it can't make the connections that your human mind can make, right?
Yeah.
And you gotta edit. If you use it, you create the content, use it for editing, great, but you got to edit the editing. I mean, it's
Yeah.
absolutely critical.
Yeah.
So,
I
all right,
agree.
Dylan, I got one last very difficult question for you. All right. So, what's the biggest mistake that you've made where you learned something really valuable that has sort of carried you through your publishing career, I would say. So something you blew up and you're like, oh my God, this was the worst thing that ever happened. But then
Mhm.
over time, you realized you just learned something and you're like, yep, never doing that again. I'm going to do it this way, and anything you want to share on that? You can, if you don't, you don't, but
Yeah.
I like asking it.
Yeah, no, a few things come to mind. When I first started driving a little bit of money, revenue, side gig
Mm,
money, if you will, from the newsletter, it was 100%, sponsorship ad based. So I
yep.
was using some different platforms to, connect with advertisers who were willing to pay me. I think my first advertised a whole $20 or $25 for like an
Yep.
insertion in my newsletter that had 500 readers. And I was like, this is so cool. I'm
Nice.
actually like
Nice.
finally making money with this thing. And yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't the dollar value that I thought was cool. It's just the fact that somebody actually paid me some money to do it.
Mm, mm,
And then that grew. And I was like, I got the taste for it. And I was like, okay, I need to do this more and grow my newsletter list and get more ads and more sponsors and charge more money. And I think the problem I faced with that was uh, there's a few things. One was I just relied on that as my only revenue stream, which is a lot of when you're the sole publisher, as I was. You got to create the content, you got to edit it, you got to publish it, but you also need to find the sponsors and
mm,
negotiate with the sponsors, and then ideally you're writing the copy because often the copy they send you for the ad or whatever it is not great. So like there's all these different parts at play, and it was a lot of work, and so I spent a lot more time working on the newsletter in my spare time because I had a full-time job than I would have liked. And then there was like the heyday of at least the more recent heyday of ads and sponsors where everybody was throwing money at newsletters. I'd say that was circa like 2021 to 2023. And then things kind of dried right up. And at least for the smaller newsletter where people were still willing to invest a little bit in advertising in smaller newsletters like mine, that's basically gone, and people just want, if they do want to advertise, it's like, no, I'm only paying for clicks or paying for leads that you're
mm,
driving me or
mm,
doing an affiliate style
mm,
sponsorship. So I'll pay you like a small flat fee, but then you're only really going to make money if you drive a sale of our tool or of our course or whatever that might be. So I learned, it wasn't a quick lesson, but I did eventually learn that having more revenue streams, multiple revenue
right,
streams for
right.
a publisher is a much better way to go. Paid subscriptions, obviously a very solid revenue stream, or it can be uh, selling different products or services or productized services. All these other things can be other ways to go too. But I just leaned in all in on one and made a decent amount of money in
Mm,
the first year and a half. And then kind of didn't make very much money after that because I hadn't created any other services or products to really sell.
mm,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, multiple channels. Yeah, that's a good
Hmm.
one. I think
Yeah.
every business needs to be looking at that, for sure.
Hmm.
Um, no question. Okay, cool. Great answer. Dylan, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Where do you want them to go? What do you want them to
Well,
do?
you've got my website there front and center. So
Yep,
growthcurrency.net is where people can find me, at least, or find my newsletter.
yep.
And I'm on LinkedIn as my main place where you can kind of interface with me or interact. Um, and so that's just my full name. You can link to that one as well in the show notes. And then those are really the main areas I hang out. I do, like I said, hang out a bit on Substack, but newsletter and LinkedIn are kind of the two main places. And then if you want to check out our podcast as well, um, it's the Growth in Reverse podcast. And I
Awesome.
co-host that with my partner Chanel, where we talk all about newsletter growth and that sort of thing. So it's it's a lot of fun. We've been doing that for a year, and she's almost a year and a half.
All right. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Dylan, thanks again for coming on. This was great. I learned a ton. Hopefully it was fun. And
Thanks, Peter. It was. Enjoyed it.
Catch you next time.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the Paywall Podcast. If you'd like to get in touch to discuss subscription strategy, go to leakypaywall.com. See you next time.